We'll go live here.
All right.
We've got our group that's going to be going out. Cool.
Hey, everyone. So are we good on LinkedIn? Is it showing? That's the main thing here. We're good on LinkedIn? All right. Good. I'm going to make sure we get the notification as well before we start, everyone. So, okay. So we kind of had a dry run, everyone, on LinkedIn who did not see this. So we were over in Facebook world talking. But I am here. My name is Rich Cardona. I'm here with Mike Sorelli and George Randall. And we are celebrating the book launch of The Talent War. And please check in. Let us know if you have the book already. Let us know if you're going to be purchasing the book. And more importantly, let us know where you're checking in from and where you're watching from so we can definitely acknowledge you. As we go on, along with the panelists, we'll have plenty of opportunity for questions. So let's just get right into it since we already kind of had a little dry run at this. But let's talk about the talent mindset and what exactly is a talent mindset. So, I've already seen comments like the talent war. Is it really a war? And I think it begins back with the mindset. So, George or Mike, who would like to go first on that one?
War. Yeah, we've gotten some pushback on that. Is it a war? Absolutely. And hopefully that doesn't offend you. We've got gentlemen like Tom Lokar here, who's a former CHRO of Midal. He'll tell you that this is a constant battle. You're up against your competition, trying to get the very best people in your organization. I think it was Tom that said the person that fields the best team wins. The end. And that's as simple as that. But a talent mindset is a foundational belief that your people are the most strategic competitive advantage you can ever hope to achieve and sustain. Special operations has a set of axioms, and one of the axioms is humans are more important than hardware. Your competitive advantages are not your technology. It's not your systems. It's your people. It always has been, and it always will be.
Yeah, really the best indicator of a talent mindset is when you start treating your human capital with the same rigor, the same discipline that you do your financial capital. When you realize that getting the best talent on the field, that's how you win. That's how you win with your product, with your service, with your sales. It doesn't matter. Talent is driving everything.
Yeah, how he says that, it's a little interesting. And I'd be interested in the panel who I know we'll introduce here. But, he says if you treat your human capital with the amount of rigor that you do your financial capital, things take care of themselves. People don't look at that. They look at it indirectly. We need to focus on our financial capital. When if you have the right people in the right positions, solving problems and seizing opportunities, the financial piece is a byproduct of that. That's what will follow.
I completely agree. I want to acknowledge some people that are here. We're on LinkedIn now. We got about 45 people. Kevin, good to see you. Kevin Black got the audiobook today, guys. Marcos Estrada, hello, retired U.S. Marine, Master Sergeant. He's in Chicago. Weston Davis, paramedic from Houston, Texas. Kevin Black, Serious Echoes. Let us know if it doesn't go away, or we'll make, hopefully our mic's not doing anything bad there. Tim King, and then happy birthday from Dean Cox. So that but of audio echo. Okay, let's just make sure we don't have any duplicate mics on. So hopefully your mic's off. So we have one mic there. All right, so let's go ahead and introduce the panel. We did this on Facebook, so sorry if you sat through that already. We're going to do it on LinkedIn now. And Will, if you could just, we'll start with Brian Decker, since he's the first in the gallery that I could see. And if you could blow him up. And George or Tom, if you want to give an introduction, or if you want Brian to do the introduction.
Yeah, all I'll say is everyone on the panel was heavily interviewed and was instrumental to this book. The work that Brian did as the Special Forces Assessment and Selection Commander was revolutionary to his community, to the point where he was recognized for his work. And the Indianapolis Colts asked him to come be their director of player development. But Brian, let's turn it over to you for a small introduction and talk about your passion.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. Yeah, my passion is assessment, selection, development. It's talent identification. I've been very fortunate to have been able to take those lessons learned in a military context and now apply them in another field. And the one thing I would say is that it's been a very unique experience in the sense that both of the businesses I've been in, the talent or the product of the business is the talent you put on the field. And there's a lot of congruence between the two.
Thank you, Brian.
All right, we're going to move on to the next. So, Rich Diviney, Mike, go ahead.
I'll take this one too. Rich and I served together in the SEAL teams. Rich was more senior than I. He was a squadron commander when I knew him the best. Much like Brian, he also led assessment and selection for a community in the SEAL teams and did the same thing. Looked at the data that they were evaluating, which wasn't providing predictive value of what makes a great operator, and revolutionized that. And now I'm excited. He's poured that into a book called The Attributes, the 25 Hidden Drivers of Optimal Performance, which comes out late January. I want to say the 25th, but Rich, I'll turn it over to you to correct that date and give an intro.
Well, thanks to you all. First and foremost, congratulations on the book. It's a phenomenal book, and going to be beneficial to everyone. And I will just say, 26, you were close, is when the book comes out. But it's interesting, Mike and I worked together in the teams. We were kind of on different tangents, writing our own books about the same topic because it's so relevant, I think. And the bottom line is talent is really a dynamic synchronization between skills and attributes. And the Talent War book talks about some of those attributes and some of those skills and how they differ. And it's really important to understand those distinctions. It's something that I dove into deeply, and I'm looking forward to continuing to dive in with you all. So congrats, and it's good to be here.
We may have lost audio.
I can hear you now.
Tom, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Great, thanks. Well, as Rich said, congratulations on the book. I'm so honored and proud to have been a part of it and to continue to be a part of it. Before I just talk about my passion, I wanted to put an exclamation point on that first comment on talent mindset and the rigor in which we deal with financials and human capital. In my previous role, every month we used to hold a G3 meeting, which was the CEO, myself, and the CFO. And it was our way of syncing up both the strategy driven by the CEO and those two important levers that he viewed as equally important. Now, sometimes, truth be told, I was there begging for money to put in new systems, but most of the time it was what do we need to invest in and how do we grow the business? How do we drive that revenue through that talent investment? And that's, again, been my passion throughout my career. I started as an IO psychologist, leadership development assessment expert. I moved into head of HR roles, and that focus has never gone away. The part of the book that I guess I really love and resonates with me is this concept of, and I probably use more of a biblical term, but mediocrity is the devil's handwork. If you are settling for people, if you are expedient to fill a job, even if you think you have a great person. I've made 2 great hires in my career as head of HR that were absolutely disastrous because they had all the qualifications, they had all the results in their background, but they were a bad fit, and it really hurt the companies until we got to making changes. So I think that's one of the things that really stands out for me, and a passion of mine is to weed out mediocrity from the top team down, because once you start that, it just starts to cascade through the people pyramid and will drive a great culture, which will drive great results.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, who do we have next?
Now, Dr. Josh Cotton is the main contributor of this book, and we were humbled to have Josh be intimately involved. So Josh and I have known each other for a long time. Like I like to say, we nerd out on conversations about talent. What's unique about Josh, that very few, just a very select few of IO psychologists have this experience. He worked with special forces, with special operations to optimize their assessment and selection. And as we use this term, special forces or special operations assessment and selection, what that is to the military is it's the hiring process. And in fact, special operations assessment and selection Brian and Rich, I don't know if you've heard me use this, it's the longest and most robust behavioral interview that can ever be run in the world. And so Josh was fascinated by what he saw in the special operations community. In fact, drove him to create a test called the Elite Performance Indicator, which Josh will tell you where you can find it. And now is applying that to Fortune 250s and crushing it in the private sector. Josh?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I mean, I'm honored always to be associated with guys like you. The work that I got to do with the Navy SEALs for 3.5 years, I also had an opportunity to work with all the different special operations groups, and I was helping them screen applicants from a psychological standpoint, of course. So a lot of screening takes place and has been for years and years. In fact, BUDS in and of itself, as Mike just mentioned, is a screening process. But in terms of trying to understand who is the guy most likely to make it through 9 months before they arrive, that's the type of work I was doing. And what an amazing opportunity. So people in my field, in industrial organizational psychology, that's what we do. We help organizations screen applicants. We use assessments to do it. But how you define success is going to be somewhat different depending on the organization. And in this one, it was something of a bit of an impossibility. Who is it that can make it through special operations training? I mean, they are amazing people. And so, yeah, as I had that opportunity to study that and analyze it, I said, wow. I mean, first of all, it was impacting me. It was changing me. And so I tried to figure out a way to share that with the world, which is epitesting.com. It's a way for, you can, use it for screening applicants, or you can use it for personal development. That's really where most of my personal passion is around this concept, simply because I saw the impact on me. Studying them, I was learning how I can be better. And I just realized, a lot of this is a mindset. And talking to that mindset, one of the reasons why that's important and in the book is because thoughts lead to behaviors, which turn into habits and turn into lifestyles. And so if you have a mindset, you're actually shaping the future of your life. And so that's one of the big reasons why we talk about mindsets in the book.
So next we have Carly Walden, who's got her camera off, and she's got some feedback going on. So I'll introduce her. Carly is the future of EF Overwatch. She'll be taking sort of the reins of the company. She's an Air Force vet, has climbed the ranks within the talent acquisition community. And I've never, she ranks up there with one of the most impressive leaders that I've ever met.
Oh yeah. Somebody who's both worked with veterans and then worked on a global scale, managing sales, managing engineering. There's nothing she hasn't recruited for. Leads a global team hiring in over 40 countries. Absolute amazing person when it comes to selecting talent, and actually, more importantly, teaching hiring managers how to go after the right talent, how to assess that talent.
So we have the introductions complete. So thank you everyone for sticking around on that. I keep seeing the numbers on live go up and up and up. So we appreciate it. Again, if you already have the book, let us know what you think in the comments for sure. And I want to get to something I think very important here, especially because Eliza's here, someone who's helping with the launch as well. And we talk about the importance of writing a book. A lot of people want to write a book to say they've written a book. But you guys obviously have a passion for this. But when does the passion actually turn into a feeling where you feel compelled to share this information because it is going to value society in a way that has probably been untapped so far?
First off, in terms of writing a book and the accolade and adding it to the resume, I just don't care. Yep. George has enough on his resume. I have enough on a resume. It's more about living a life of impact. What most people get wrong is that the greatest currency in life is not the amount of money you accumulate. It's the impact you have on other people. And the reason I say that, and I'm not trying to sound cliche, is that I am a product of guys like Rich, Diviney, and Tom, and Brian, mentors that have shaped me into the leader that I am today. And I still have so much to learn. But we fundamentally believe the greatest strength in this nation is not the U.S. military, even though it's pretty damn impressive. And I've seen it in action as well as these gentlemen as well. It's the U.S. economy. And George and I have these conversations. We work with small to mid-sized businesses. That's our target market. and the leaders approach us and they just don't know how to hire. And guess what? It's not their fault. We've been through the greatest, and this is what the military is. The military is the world's greatest leadership development platform without debate. If Fortune 500s could replicate it, and it's not a matter of money. If they could replicate it, they would, but they don't have the domain expertise. And again, we're not throwing stones here, but these great leaders call us and they're like, hey, we need to identify talent. I'm good at the actual fundamentals of my industry. I just don't know how to hire. I don't know how to run the process. And after we had enough of those phone calls, literally, I don't remember what I was watching with Jordan, my wife, who, if I don't mention, I will hear it tonight. She's my foundation.
You did it.
Yeah.
Good.
I think it was like Real Housewives of something.
Yes.
Maybe. I think that's what it
She owns
was.
a TV. I just go along. And I'm like, hey, give me a moment. I went outside to call George. I'm like, dude, we need to put our thoughts into the book. And we knew the title. I'm like, let's call it The Talent War. And we're like, how special operations. We, at the end, interviewing guys like Tom Lokar and Don Robertson and Tracy Keogh, who, again, is one of the most impressive leaders I've ever met, like Carly. We added "and great organizations," because there are organizations in the private sector that do this well. I mean, everyone should know about the Netflix culture deck and what Patty McCord and Reed Hastings did, that they've defined a very intentional culture. So, I hope we sell a lot of books. More importantly, George, I think it's the impact. If we get just that one email that says, hey, you guys have helped us gain a talent mindset, then we're in.
George, you seem ready.
Yeah, it was. I get this strange call, and I got lots of strange calls from Mike, over time. But we'll get to the one about, hey,
I don't drink anymore, just so the crowd knows.
The strangest call, of course, is one where he says, hey, I need you to officiate at our wedding, but we'll get to that part a little bit later.
It's not in the book.
So I was totally not surprised. But no, you always want to share the information. Mike and I were always about making an impact. And it was a very serendipitous moment when he came up with the idea, because you're colliding two worlds. I had spent a little bit of time in the military, enlisted as an officer, and Mike had spent a full 20 years, and he had spent a ton of time in some of the most amazing teams that have ever been created. And I'm seeing, 20 years, and I'm getting to work with a lot of people, and I'm seeing it done wrong over and over and over and over again. So 20 years in the talent acquisition space, and he comes up with this idea. I'm like, well, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Then we started reaching out to professionals, and, Mike asked me about, who should we be talking to? And I was like, okay, Tom Lokar's top of the list. I said, you want to see how somebody does it right, somebody that understands this on a commercial sense and on a big scale, and so we started pulling together just all the people that had influenced us. And then it was a labor of love from there on out. Wasn't easy, but we did it.
You talk about, again, it wasn't the end state of the book. It was also part of the process, the journey.
Sure.
You talk about running an interview for 60 to 90 minutes with these men and women. And after Brian Decker or Tom Lokar or Carly or Rich or Josh would contribute, you walk away ready to run through walls. And everything they say makes sense. It's simple. It's just hard to execute.
Sure. So I have a lot of questions here, but here's one that I know we made a post on LinkedIn that exploded. And this one is around, and I'm skipping around here, but about a culture fit. I believe in today's, clearly George has nothing to say. So when it comes to a culture fit, even someone like me who comes from a different kind of operational background and corporate after my Marine Corps career, was establishing and looking around at the culture and determining this is not a culture fit for me. And then looking at other companies and be like, that would be a good culture fit for me, as if that needs to resonate on such a high level that it should be prioritized in the hiring process per se. But you guys disagree with that on very largely. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
No, you did. You just hammered it on the last interview. I thought it was perfect. I'm not even sure I could add.
So what culture fit is, and what a lot of people do in the hiring process, and it's just their biases that they don't know they're conducting. But when they think culture fit, they're naturally correlating that with likability. And likability is not a factor you should be using in the hiring process. When you're talking to somebody and you have this warm feeling, you're like, this guy's a culture fit, or this woman is a culture fit. I like them. If I asked, and I want the panel to weigh in here, I know if I asked Rich Diviney or Brian Decker, did you like all the SEALs and Green Berets that you served with? I guarantee the answer would be no. And Same goes for me. I didn't like all the SEALs, but we could on Monday put our differences aside, the likability factor, and drive towards a common goal and achieve victory. And then come Friday, they go hang out with who they hang out with, and I go hang out with who I hang out with. But what you're looking for with culture fit, and it's actually, again, it goes back to the Netflix culture deck. We're not trying to build family. Stop saying you're trying to build a family. EF Overwatch, even though we are a tight-knit, high-performing team, we are a team, not a family. You are looking for culture in terms of values. Does this person's values align with mine? Can I trust Rich Diviney when I am not around to do the right thing for the good of the team? Can he put his self-needs aside for the organization? George, and then I'd love to open that to the panel.
Yeah, I would give it to the panel. It's just people tend to over-index on those things, and that's one of the things that we wanted everybody to do was you need to be focusing on the attributes. You need to be focusing on these 9 characteristics, that we put out in the book. But I think both Rich and Tom and Carly, I guarantee you will hear the culture and likability fit all the time.
And Tom, I'd be interested because people cling on to these buzzwords, and I don't think they truly understand what they mean, or maybe it's warped as things go from business to business.
Yeah, I could go on a real tangent here about culture, so I'll try to be parsimonious and pragmatic. Because one of the mistakes I think around culture fit is that everyone at that moment of selecting or interviewing a group of candidates for a role understands what the culture is at that moment. And it's not always the placard with the 5 values. Now, kudos to your company and kudos to your CEO and leadership team if everything about your company lives and breathes those values. But that's not often the case. What's actually valued, what actually is the culture, is what gets reinforced, what gets done and said and followed through, largely by leadership, which is where I live. Where I live in the talent war is really on the leadership space, and where I live around culture is who are our leaders, what are they saying, and what are they doing to reinforce that. And the mistake we make in trying to hire toward the culture fit is that the culture is this river, constantly moving, constantly changing. And the measurement of that, to me, and again, this is probably controversial to a lot of people who believe in culture surveys and believe in absolutely nailing culture onto stone tablets, is it's a living, breathing thing. It's never always defined. And so you have to focus on what are the requirements of excellence in the role. What are the necessary skills, competencies, experiences that you believe will make that person, whether it's at the top of the house or boots on the ground, successful in that job. And as Josh and others on this call have defined in their own careers, assessing to that with the best tools you can. And then there's a whole bunch of process things around onboarding and orientation and getting the person up to speed to the company and the way the company works, not what it says in the placards, how it really works. And then you can make a successful fit. But to me, it really starts with what do you need in the role? What does excellence look like in that role? Don't settle for anything else. And the culture piece will take care of itself if you do that over and over the right way.
We're going to hit up Rich Diviney on, continuing up on this point. So, Will, if you could switch to Rich, please. Let's talk about culture, the culture fit and what it is and what it is not.
Yeah, I mean, so much brilliance. And I think some of what I say is going to probably just be a different way of saying the same stuff. Cultures, I think the mistake most people, organizations, teams make when they think about culture is they think of it objectively. And cultures are really very subjective and contextual. So the culture of one team, an organization, is and has to be different than the culture of another team. And so the first step in any organization or team is to define what that is. That is made up of a series of skills and attributes, but I would agree it's mostly attributes. It's mostly those character qualities, those innate traits and things that we bring to the table, and what that team actually requires. And so I think we get, I hear Mike when he says, let's not talk about family, and he's correct. I mean, I think most people, most organizations want to say the word family because it implies a sense of trust and safety. But even trust and safety are contextual based on the team. Trust and safety in a SEAL team is different than trust and safety in a team of nurses or an HR team. Those requirements for that feeling, for that culture, for that effort are going to be different. And in one team, it might mean that you all need to like each other and get along. And another team, it might not mean that at all. It means you have to be competent in certain things and understand that you can lean on people in uncertainty, challenge, and stress. So I think if there's one message, it is that organizations and teams need to begin to dive deeper or more deeply into culture, and then what it is subjectively and specifically for you as a team. And this effort, this book, is a great way to start because it helps you define those terms. And definition of terms is, I think, first.
I want to make one comment based off both Tom and Rich. Tom, in chapter 10, which maybe we should have made chapter 1, but we intentionally put it at the end. It was sort of the, hey, this is all great, and it is. But before you even build or even talk about building a world-class talent acquisition program, you better know who you are. You better have a very intentional culture before you even design that other process. And then to Rich, one of the things that we often get from a lot of companies is they reach out and we get these emails. They're like, hey, what are the steps I need to be taking during the interview process for my company? And for which, we don't have a subscriptive answer for them. It's going to be different for every company. It's different for every domain or industry, and even different companies within that same domain and industry. And what this book is intended to do is to help you create a talent mindset and figure out the process for your individual organization. And then once you think you figure out that process, it's much like entrepreneurship. It's just iteration. It's iterate as quickly as possible. Have a feedback loop as you make each hire that you're conducting an after action based on the quality and the performance of that individual hire. And if that's something that you can make a systematic, repeatable process.
Yeah, I'd like to get to Brian and Dr. Cotton here momentarily. And what I think the panel, I'd love to leverage your strengths here and talk about, especially you, Brian. You've assessed in the past, and now you've pivoted to doing it in another group of elite performers. And I want to know what that was like, looking at where you came from and where you are now in terms of identifying what is the nomenclature, so to speak, of elite talent, followed by Josh. I'd love to hear about the elite performance indicators for the audience. But Brian, we'll start with you.
I think it all really, for me, in both the realms I've worked in, it starts with defining success, it goes back to, and like you said before, those shared beliefs, values, and behaviors that we all value in our organizations. The one thing that I've noticed that was really key for getting it right in Special Forces assessment selection is when we go to measure those attributes, or we go to measure those values and beliefs and the ability to work together, is we have to replicate the type of operating environment we're ultimately going to serve in. Whenever I took over assessment selection, we had a very simple, stable environment. The role of leadership was very central. But when you look at the nature of special operations, it's very complex. It's very dynamic. The role of leadership it's more decentralized. So for us, we were trying to assess behaviors and values, or trying to look at their resume, and we weren't replicating the nature of the environment in which it ultimately served. So one of the things that we did to generate those behaviors was we went to a leaderless environment. And I know that's more of a misnomer. It's an emergent leader environment. And what we did was we just brought groups together, drop a problem in the middle, watch how they organize and solve that problem. And during that time, then we're gathering those behaviors. We're using our behavioral anchored rating system. We developed that success profile. And, by the time I had left assessment selection, our success rate, meaning making it through the qualification course, had gone from, just under 50% to it was trending toward 80%. And what it was is, in both cases, we had very talented individuals, but we had people who had those attributes necessary to bring that talent to bear in that type of environment. Now, where I work at now, we kind of think about it just a little bit different. We think about talent as a person's ceiling. That's, if they fully express to their level of talent, that's their ceiling. And we think about those attributes, the character, the makeup, whatever you want to call it, we consider that the floor. And so really, to me, what I have found working in both is that once you get really talented individuals, it's those with the right attributes that can make it express in your domain.
Great. And I'd like to pivot to Dr. Cotton about elite performance indicators and what exactly that means and what led you to do the work to identify these as you did in the book.
Yeah, absolutely. So to start with, it was probably the best week of my career. I went out to meet with the Navy SEALs because Navy recruiting said, "Hey, Josh, if you want to keep working on this project, you're going to have to go talk to the SEALs because we're done." And I said, "Really? Great. I'd rather work with the SEALs." So I went out there. I met with a captain, Captain Bill Wilson. He was the head of Naval Special Warfare Center at the time, which runs BUDS. And I told him what I wanted to do, which was change the algorithm. So we were using already an assessment, and I had done some research, and I said, "You know what? I can make it better. I can make it more predictive." I put together this ridiculously long, they call them a brief. In the civilian world, they call them a deck. I don't know, it was like 60 slides or something, way too much. I showed it to him. He's like, "Got it. I like it. I want to show this to my boss." And I'm like, "Oh, who's that?" And he goes, "But you only get 6 slides." I was like, "Oh my God, what am I going to do?" So I condensed this thing down. And then 2 days later, I met with the admiral, the guy in charge of Navy SEALs. And I went over things with him. I remember him, Admiral Winters, appropriately named because he was this older guy. He gets up from the table, walks over, gets some coffee, says, "I'm still listening. I'm still listening." And this is really complex stuff. I'm like, "Is he?" He liked what I had to say, came back and said, "Okay, I get it, but you only get 2 slides." And so they kept cutting it. Then Friday, I presented to what's called the MAGCOM, which is this awesome opportunity for somebody like me. The major commanders, so all the commanders of all the different SEAL groups, and Dev Group was on the VTC. I didn't even know. I was so new. This is my first week working with the SEALs. Well, in that meeting, there ended up being 3 2-star SEAL admirals in the room because the incoming was there. And one of them turned to me and said, "Hey, this is great. You've been studying this. So what is it we're looking for?" And I was not prepared to answer that. I had done math at this point. I had done math and I had explained math. And I explained the practical implications of changing the math. I didn't know the answer to that question. So I set about to answer that. And I studied a bunch of SEALs. I studied a bunch of students. And I started to learn a lot of things, including what was missing on the test. And before I went down the avenue of actually building something, I had already decided I was going to leave the government, and I went to the Fortune 500 world to do the same thing, help them screen their applicants. And so I built this assessment to model what I was seeing that was important in what determined who made it through. And it wasn't just the SEALs, of course. It was I had access to Army and Marines and Air Force Special Operations, and I looked for what was lining up, what was the same. And it's not like shooting ability. People sometimes, mishear, as Mike and George and I have had many conversations about misconceptions of veterans. I know that there's one with special operations is they think they're just warriors, and that's all they are. But what they really are elite performers. They are people that eat obstacles for breakfast. They literally seek them out, not because they want to make their life hard, but because they want to be better. And they have this mindset, this growth mindset of, I want to grow, I want to be better. And that's one of the ingredients. Wasn't on the assessment originally. Other things were missing. I guess I shouldn't go into detail of all the things missing, but That's what the elite performance indicator is. It's a collection of those aspects that determine what is actually successful in special operations. The most amazing people, literally, performers, the most amazing employees.
Thank you so much for that, both of you. I want to get into something really I believe is a concern for a lot of people out in the world, whether you're transitioning from the military or transitioning from one industry to another or whatever it may be. And you say right here specifically in the book, no one has prior special operations experience, so raw talent must be the selection criteria. The most effective selection is based on mindset and character. To take it a step further, I am coming out, or I'm pivoting industries, and George, I know we've talked about this before, and I see the requisites, and it requires me to have multiple layers and years of experience in this category. Is that a fallacy, or is that accurate to require those of people who lack that experience?
Well, you know, Mike and I went to great lengths in the book. It's not that we discount experience, but I think Brian gave us this wonderful quote that was, performance isn't necessarily portable. It isn't necessarily because you performed in another environment. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be performing in this particular environment. You still have to screen for those attributes that we talk about. And actually, when you start seeing job descriptions, and you could go out right now on Indeed and you'll see page after page, line after line after line of objective requirements, 2 to 3 years of this. But is 4 years of a coding language better than 2 years of a coding language? Does any of that matter up? Is any of it predictive? That is the default position for hiring these days versus starting with what does success look like in this role? And from that, defining those attributes and then what the minimum gates are for experience. Once you meet the minimum requirements, there might be minimum requirements, but there should never be maximum requirements. And you need to put those things out there and describe what the attributes, what that role is like. And there may be some basic things in there, but over-indexing on experience is, frankly, it's part of the fear-based hiring we talk about. If a manager says, well, I hired a guy or a gal and they had 8 years of experience, I don't know why they didn't work out. Oh my goodness. Well, they had everything that we asked for. You just see it time and time and time again. And really what you need to do is define success for the role. And special operations, as Mike's going to tell you, they don't have the luxury.
So
1 second, Mike.
Yeah,
If you have been in that situation where you have read the requisites and it has actually deterred you from applying for a position in which you know that your leadership or character attributes would lend well to that role or that organization, definitely let us know in the comments. I think we'd love to hear that feedback. That'd be fantastic. And then that'll obviously give George and Mike a little bit to chew on when book 2 comes out. Well, I'm just kidding. I don't know when that is, but anyway.
not as far as you think.
But Mike, please.
And so, he said a key word, and actually a few individuals on the panel have said it as well, objective. Because years of experience are objective, and we usually, as humans, default mode is not aggressive, as Jocko Willink likes to say. Most humans, or majority of humans, default mode is lazy. And objective things are easy to measure. It's the subjective that requires a lot of, let's say, scars and a lot of time and dedication to become truly good at assessing somebody's character, which is completely subjective. So the running joke is, people ask, how does special operations build such elite teams? And I say, well, we can't go to the high schools and the colleges and say, hey, as the auditorium's filled, we're recruiting for the Army Special Forces. Everyone raise your hand if you have special operations experience. Nobody would raise their hands. So by nature, by the community and the I would say the demographic that we hire, we had to become very good at potential-based hiring. That Rich and Brian just sort of alluded to. There's a reason that special operations is designed, the assessment selection portion. The reason I call it the longest behavioral interview in the world is it's designed to push people, and I'm going to turn this over to Brian and Rich because they articulate it in such a beautiful way. It's designed to push people to their mental and physical limits, not because we're sadists and we love to watch people suffer in pain. We'd love to watch them in the surf, cold, wet, and sandy for hour after hour at the brinks of hypothermia. That's not the purpose. It's because at one's limits, does true character reveal itself. So now to the business world. Do not go out and take your candidates that are applying for a job out to the surf zone. You'll end up in a litigious situation. So you have to find ways to apply pressure during your multivariate hiring process, from assessments to assignments to the interview, both informational and behavioral. And that's not hard to do. You watch this guy interview, and we just watched him interview a very senior executive. And the way he applies pressure in the interview in a very professional manner is impressive, but it's effective to truly draw out who that man or woman is. Hey, Brian, Rich, let me open it up. Just put it on panel view for both of them. Both of you I know are passionate about this subject.
Let's start with you, Brian.
I want to kind of go back just for a second, because we talked about, hiring based off of experience. And one of the problems I find with experience is that one of the sometimes you're measuring, how do you really separate an individual's contribution to the success they've had? Because a lot of times it's something unique about that ecosystem that's contributed to their success. I mean, use the football analogy. Maybe this quarterback may have had a great offensive line. He may have had a great, wide receiving core. He may have had a great defense, whatever that might be. So to me, one of the problems with hiring based off of experience is that you sometimes miss because you don't understand the nuances, the ecosystem they're coming from. So that kind of takes me to my second point, is that when you look at a resume, it's really what somebody's been able to do. And I just have found that what doesn't always translate, but I've found that how does. So you go back and you understand how they've achieved those victories along the way. And I think that you can expect that to port. When you get to the character piece, to me, one of the things that, a lot of people in different industries will say character is important. It's not important. When you do meta-analysis, it's like, marginal in its predictive validity. And I think what the problem there is that I think there's maybe at the macro level, the trends aren't there, but at the micro level, if you define the character needed to be successful in your organization and you select for that, I definitely think you increase your chances. One of my passions has been is just try to understand greatness in all realms, whether that be Alex Baumgartner jumping from 125,000 foot to an elite NFL player, to Lance Armstrong, to an elite Green Beret. And, there are some universals that I've seen kind of come out. All of those who go on to be great in those domains take the skill away, and they all have incredible drive. And you see that drive expressed in their work habits and their resilience. And to me, they all show an incredible ability to adapt because they're all going to hit these plateaus or difficulties along the way, and they have that ability to overcome those. And to me, it's that persistence and the resilience. And I think those are fairly universal in being successful in most fields.
Rich, love your thoughts as well.
Yeah, thank you. All great stuff. I'm learning so much as I sit here, which is the point, I think. So experience, let's just go back to the basics, which Mike and George mentioned. Okay, know thyself. Experience is one of those words that, again, we tend to wrap definitions around, and we need to get a little bit more in depth. Experience matters, but it really depends on the type of experience. So the military has a saying, I know all of you all on the panel have heard it, some of you listening in, the military has a saying that goes, you train for certainty and you educate for uncertainty. Okay, training is about practicing known codified skills, doing something over and over again to get good at it. That could be shooting a gun, it could be driving a car, it could be throwing a football. That's what you train. That is experience in one sense of the word, although it's experience in known certain environments. Education is different. Education is learning, observing, reacting. Education exercises attributes because education is about understanding and interacting with an environment that is uncertain, and therefore bringing attributes such as adaptability, perseverance, resilience to the fore. And so that suffice it to say, someone, the lady who spent a decade digging wells in a third world country and building huts for people may in fact be a much better choice for an HR rep than the guy who just spent 10 years at the company and knows the company in and out, because her experience is different. This is where most companies get it wrong. They look at experience in terms of codified known skills. They don't look at it in terms of true education. And the other thing I'll add is, the reason why we had such a wonderful laboratory inside of Spec Ops in which we could see this is because I called SEALs this when I was in training. I call all Spec Ops, but we are masters of uncertainty. The environment we train for and assess for is how to operate in uncertainty. Well, guess what that doesn't do? That doesn't count very many skills. Certainly we come to the table with skills. When you are operating in uncertainty, you must first figure out the environment. You do that with attributes. It's when attributes come to the fore, because you need your mental acuity attributes, your situation awareness, your compartmentalization, your adaptability, all that stuff to figure out what's going on before you apply a known skill. And this is the crucible inside of which we had the opportunity to see this so viscerally. And it's admittedly more difficult in the business world, but I think, again, Mike, George, Josh, you guys put together a book that really kind of outlines it very well.
Next, we got a question from Michael Nereida. I believe that's how you say it. And behind the scenes here, I asked it to George and Mike, and they immediately looked at me and said, Tom. So Tom, this question is going to be for you, and I'll just read it out for anyone who's watching as well. How can a company get extraordinary results from ordinary people? I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Apparently, you're an expert there.
Because I'm ordinary, yes, and I've done well. Thank you. Yes, so that's actually a big question, and goes to that context that Rich was talking about. I look, if an entire company is extraordinary, then no one's extraordinary. There are gradations of talent in every company, just as there are gradations of importance for every role. And that's not to minimize and say that, okay, everything at the lower level is less important than the higher level. But there are some extraordinary things that are needed at the higher level. And there's some extraordinary things needed at the associate level. My daughter's a entry-level HR associate at Amazon at one of their distribution centers in Dallas, and I'm watching the work she's having to do and what she has to deal with. And there are a lot of extraordinary circumstances that those folks deal with, and they're just people they're hiring off the street and trying to bring a discipline of supply chain expertise, logistics around those roles to make those people do what Amazon does every minute of every day, every hour, to produce extraordinary results. And so there's a really good example that I've just sort of gotten through osmosis through my daughter working with Amazon is they're taking tons of what we would call ordinary people that are able to thrive in this context or system for success. And I think that there's more to that we could go on about in terms of, the performance orientation of the company. Mike, I know you love the Netflix culture story, and why were they able to move and pivot to that type of organization? Well, they just didn't tolerate mediocre performance in certain jobs at certain levels. They continued to push the bar up, and their compensation would go with it. And so the Netflix culture, at least as I understand it, and I don't know Patty, and I didn't work there, is that they were always moving that bar. And so you would say, well, then they didn't tolerate anyone ordinary. Well, somewhere in the organization, there are people that are doing the day-to-day to make the company go, and the context of the company and the leadership of the company and the management of the company is strong enough that those people can provide a value. And I've always felt, as a head of HR, and this is a head of HR, not in my IO psychologist assessment role, that you need some solid B players. You need some. You don't need a type A in every job. You need some solid B players that come and grind every day. And we might call them ordinary, but they're almost extraordinary in their ability to dedicate themselves to a role a day in and day out and do it well. They don't have to be excellent at that role. The role doesn't require it. The company's results don't require it, but the context of the company allows that to permeate, because the performance culture is such that in the key roles, where performance always has to shift for the company to achieve its results or beat its results. The company is constantly doing that. So I think it's two parts. You can get extraordinary results from ordinary people, but you can't have ordinary people doing ordinary work in every job, or your company won't survive. If that made sense.
Yeah, and Mike's pen was on fire here, so we're going to switch to Mike out. He wanted to add on to that, Tom. So go ahead.
No, it's funny. We all get fired up about this subject. We're all passionate. In fact, this thing could go on for pretty much 8 hours, and then we could re-adjourn every day of this week. So, what's the goal? And Netflix talked about it, is they're going to push out mediocrity because they want a rock star in every role. That's the goal. I get it. Easier said than done. Even at the elite levels of special operations, where you've got a lot of rock stars, all talent, regardless of your industry or domain, follows a normal distribution. You can rank, and you should rank, all your talent. And a lot of people don't like that because they feel that could be demeaning. It's not intended to. It's to identify who needs more leadership development and training to get them past the median performance level if they're below, or even raise it beyond that. So, however, performance follows a different distribution. We can say the power distribution or Price's law, where your top performers produce a, let's say, disproportionate amount of the results for the organization. And again, the goal is to try to push as many people towards the right side of the normal distribution. Now, in my career, thank you for the question. I know Mike, an amazing business leader who's passionate about this. Regardless if you get rock stars or ordinary people into the organization, they all require training and development. And this is what the military, I don't want to say just special operations, the military does as a whole. It's part of our culture, is that everyone is undergoing constant training in leadership development, coaching, and mentoring, regardless of where you're at in that normal distribution. And sometimes those at the lower end of the distribution require more. And quite frankly, sometimes we use those higher performers to help try to move or shift that median, the overall median of the normal distribution. Training and development of your people is not optional. It's mandatory for all leaders. This is why it's the talent war, and this is why it's the never-ending battle, is it never stops. Everyone is looking for the plug and play. Oh, well, I got that person of 8 years of experience, just plug them into the role, just make my job easy. I shouldn't have to mentor or coach them. If that is your approach, you're wrong. And ultimately that situation is going to fail for you. And here's the other thing that people get wrong about this. I said it's a never ending war. Cultures don't change overnight. And I'll tell a quick story. Brigadier General Howard Prince, mentor of mine, Vietnam, West Point, wounded 3 times in Vietnam. The worst was the 3rd time when he was taking cavalry to reinforce the Marines during the offensive in Hue and the Tet Offensive. And so he naturally became a psychologist, and he studied the Army culture during the drafty years of Vietnam to the all volunteer force post-Vietnam. And the Army, the organization, and I'm not being disloyal to the Marine Corps, the Navy, or the Air Force here, the Army wrote the manual on leadership. And you have an organization that doubles down on how to lead, and they had to change the way they lead, because how you lead a draftee who doesn't want to be there from a all volunteer force who raised their hand to be there was very different. You couldn't take the volunteers around the corner and beat the living snot out of them if they didn't do what you said. And so they had to relearn that. He talked about how it took an organization that already knew how to lead, and it took them 10 years to change their culture. This is the commitment you make as business leaders and as organizations to change your culture, to change your talent acquisition process, to change your leadership or your talent management process. So you combine that equation and create a different organization.
Rich, we spent 9 chapters back and forth trying to figure out the best way to articulate how to select, assess, attract the best talent, and to get those in the most critical roles. But at the end of the book, we had to anchor the book and to the point of the question, which is you can't hire or fire your way to success. You have to lead, you have to coach, you have to train, you have to mentor. It doesn't end with the hiring process. And that's part of the continuous battle. That's part of the war. You're always, markets change, economies change, people develop, markets grow, people move on, people get promoted. it's a constant cycle. And though we talked through 9 chapters about how to get absolutely zeroed in on the best talent and develop a process, at the end, we absolutely close it out with leadership being the most important thing to coach, mentor, train, and lead.
We have a couple more questions. Derek Russell, I see yours. We're going to hit one that we got on YouTube, and I'm not sure we're going to be able to put it on, but I'll present it to you guys and to present to the panel as well, which is, and I'll just kind of reframe this question. Is it better to have an A player, top performer, or an alpha player? And Mike, that question was directed to you initially.
Yeah,
I know why.
So
I
we
know
put
why.
something out on LinkedIn about A players select A players, and we talk about this in the book. The people running your hiring, and Rich and Brian, as well as Tom, everyone on this panel understand this very well, is when we say an A player, you're talking about a top performer. You want your top performers involved intimately in the hiring process, because an A player selects additional A players. In fact, an A player has the ability, the humility to check their ego and say, hey, Eliza over there, that woman, that young woman, she has more potential than I did at that age. And she, quite frankly, can be better than I can. And she's going to challenge me. And she's going to elevate my performance as well and get her into the organization, because I know if I have as many rock stars on my team, we're going to accelerate the overall performance of the organization. Now, when I put that out, people said, hey, well, alpha males and A players are completely different. And I just talked about it. A players are high in humility. They have this selflessness about them. They understand they're a work in progress. They're not concerned about their place in the organization. They're concerned about the place of the organization. It's better. Even if I was 10 out of 10 people, I was the lowest ranked player, I'd rather be part of a winning team than number one on a losing team. And that's what A players understand. Alpha players are what they're saying. Alpha males, we don't have room for that. An alpha male is full of ego, full of complacency. And that actually is a B or C. Let's be honest, that's a C player. When you put a B or C player in charge of hiring, they then sort of fall back to fear-based hiring of, oh, now Eliza, if she comes into this organization, I'm going to lose my place. And they're going to pass on Eliza. And again, default to industry experience, which is objective and induces less overall fear.
I got to follow up. So Dr. Khan, I'm interested to get your take on this. In terms of like, what is the threshold from where a team player, a high top performer, crosses into that of an alpha, and they're probably oblivious to the fact that they're no longer performing at a high level, and they just maybe like hearing themselves talk, or they are leaning on their past leadership to carry the team forward, and how is that detrimental?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's definitely complex. And as I was studying special operators, of course, they are exceptional and very good at what they're trying to do. So it goes to their head, but not necessarily in a bad way, because if you are winning all the time, you should be yourself as a winner. So what is the check and balance that stops people from going too far or treating people poorly? And I'll tell you what it is in special operations. It's their mantras, it's their value systems that they enforce, and they do enforce it. So it's norms. It is what we would call culture. And just one point back to the culture discussion is culture. Screening for culture can work if you have a strong culture. The problem is most civilian organizations don't have a strong culture. One of the strongest cultures that I've ever seen are the Marines. If you're in the Marines, happy birthday, Marines.
Yeah.
If you're a Marine, you're a Marine for life. No civilian organization has that. If you go to Google and you're a Googler, you're not a Googler for life, even though they do have a pretty unique culture. At least that's what it seems like from the outside. So if you have a strong culture, you can select for it. But the norms, and as Tom said, leaders enforce the culture. The culture is not what's on the wall. It's what the leaders do every day. And so if without that, you get these alpha males, you get these people who just run over people because nobody's stopping them, because there's really no rules other than get it done, get it done fast, cheap, high efficiency. If those are your values, you're going to get bad behavior. And I'm really glad to see business schools putting ethics back in to MBA programs because, they took it out for a while because, I guess it impedes profits, but that's not true. The research actually shows veteran-led Fortune 500s have higher ratings on ethics and actually outperform their competitors. How could that possibly be? Because these things matter. It matters to protect each other from each other and setting higher standards. As I think it was Mike said, putting the team above self. Alpha players aren't going to do that. Alpha males, are not going to do that.
We have a question for the panel here from Derek Russell. Hopefully you're still on, and I know you guys were on his show very recently. It's kind of up for grabs. We can do a little round robin if necessary, but how can you help leaders be more empathetic to career objectives of their employees, people who want to grow, and how do leaders better cultivate a pathway for that growth? And I would actually add on to that a little bit, Derek, which I think what you might be getting at is the fear of people trying to demonstrate where they want to go a little bit too soon and prematurely. So anyone who wants to take that, I'd really like your perspective on it.
They're all jumping.
I'll take this one since in my role it's been one of those things that has gotten lost in the whole performance appraisal, performance evaluation cycle, and that is first off, if you don't as a leader have 5 or 10 people who have moved on out of your organization into bigger, better roles, even above you, or at least appear to you, I would question your leadership skills. I'd question your assessment skills, your talent development skills, and your ability to advocate for the people on your team, because I think that's one of the qualities that maybe you don't assess for, but you'll evaluate a great leader by, is how many people have moved on to become CEOs or CHROs or CMOs or pick the C-suite that leader represented. That's first and foremost to me is, and something I interview for with executives is, how much of your team has moved on into roles above you. The second part of that, the performance evaluation sort of conundrum, is the daily conversation with your employees should be about feedback and how they can improve, how they can grow. It should never be a quarterly, a monthly. It should never be defined by HR. It should always be a continuous conversation. Like when this presentation's done, I'd like to get feedback from Mike and George on how I did and what I could do better for the next one. Real time, right in the moment, help me grow. And in that conversation around that performance moment, there's always the context of what are we trying to achieve is that in that employee's career? What are they looking to grow toward, and nudging and coaching and moving toward that. To me, it really isn't about an empathy factor, although doing it well can rely on the skill of empathy because you're putting yourself in that person's shoes. It's really relying on the factor of how many people am I moving up in my organization. Bristol-Myers, we used to, and I think Pepsi started this, but Bristol-Myers, we would measure in our succession planning before a leader could move up, how many people did they move up? How many people have moved up and out of their organization? How many people have moved into their organization? That was always a measure of great leadership. So, I'm almost arguing with the premise of the question. To me, it isn't about empathy. It's about the result of great leadership that you would care for your employees.
Yes. Sorry if anyone else had some. We have a couple more questions. I just want to make sure so we can stick on timeline. I'm going to give this one to George, and he'll be able to hand it off to probably Rich, Brian, or Josh as well. And this one is we talked about the interview process. How does an interviewee select an appropriate boss or company? What would you put out there for that person in that position? And I think we've had a conversation where you're like, they actually have the leverage.
Yeah. So if I'm interviewing with the company, which I've done a number of times, and I would tell you, this is where ego from a company, and we talk about this in the book, is that what's interesting is the company has a choice, the candidate has a choice. And companies have this sometimes built-in arrogance where they think that, okay, this candidate absolutely wants to come join us, but candidates have a choice. And A players want to work for A talent. And one of the ways, if you're an interviewee, is you need to be asking about their leadership style. Ask, to Tom's point, how many people have moved up and out of that organization? Be asking questions about what they incentivize. You know, how many people have moved on? The last person in this role, or the last person that knocked it out of the park, where are they now? What are they doing? Simple question. And it puts somebody on the spot in a very professional way to say, okay, this is where my team has gone. This is how I've developed. You talk about how do you coach? How do you mentor? What are the opportunities for professional development? There's any number of questions that you can ask as an interviewee that talk professionally about your desire to impact in a company and help you define that company as being the best place for you.
And to that, I mean, you should have a great list of questions that are trying to get deep into the conversation. On the flip side of that, as the interviewer, you should also be evaluating on the level of questions that the candidate is asking as well. I can't go further without addressing some things that Tom said. One, I think the greatest litmus test of any organization is your alumni. And if each of your alumni, or a high percentage of your alumni, go on to do amazing things, then it does reflect on the leadership. And it actually creates a self-perpetuating sort of cycle, because people meet that individual and they identify themselves as a former McKinsey consultant who's now the CEO of a company. And they're like, I need to go work for McKinsey. Every single person, and I'm not saying every single person I've met from McKinsey is highly successful. I'm just using that as an example. But when they see that, it actually helps the talent acquisition piece, and you become a talent magnet. Now, we have to be careful. And I think too many business leaders are so quick to try to gain, the favor of their subordinate leaders. In order to truly take care of somebody, to have empathy for what they want and to help them grow. And let's be honest, what people want. People want growth opportunity. They want autonomy, and they want ownership to make decisions. That's what we all want. And that's actually the definition of the type of culture we're all going for. And the ultimate form of culture is decentralized command. Because when you have a decentralized command, and let's go back to General McChrystal wrote about this in Team of Teams. And Jocko Willink talks about this a lot. When you've got the right people in the right decision, or in the right places, making the right decisions that you've trained so well and you have full trust in, as a leader, you can step back and you can make better strategic decisions for your organizations, because you're no longer involved in the tactical fires that are going on day to day. That's the type of culture. But the military does a great job. And this it doesn't sound right at face value, but Rich, Brian know this one. Mission first, troop welfare second. You know this one. And people are like, well, your people should always come first. Yes, they do. But if we are not accomplishing the mission, if we're not driving revenue, then this organization will not be around. So when we sit down with people, again, I keep fixating on Eliza over here. Hey, Eliza, I want to help you get to where you want to be in life. I want to help you accelerate within this organization. I want to give you autonomy, growth opportunities, and ownership. But we also have to drive results first for the organization. The better we do with that, the more attention I can pay to what you want to achieve within your life. And I think a lot of business leaders get that wrong. They reverse it. And when you reverse it, eventually organizations are sunk.
Brian and Rich, I have a question here for you. Thank you, Mike, for that, obviously. And we'll start with you, Rich. And we'll start with you, Brian, and then we'll move to Rich. The question is, any advice or recommendations for strategies on moving through an organization where those B and C players are the ones doing the hiring? How do you, yes. And I mean, I believe, and we could focus in on Brian, that the assessor becomes the assessed in that kind of category. So Brian, I'd love to hear what you got.
I'm looking at this one more time because that's a pretty complex question. You know, it's one that I've actually struggled with myself. I quoted, or I responded one time to something Mike had posted on LinkedIn, is that a lot of companies will abdicate their hiring process to prior experiences, and they typically have a young person who's screening resumes, and a lot of veterans and people with experience like us, they don't know how to translate that. It doesn't make sense. So So it quickly gets shuffled out of the pile. I mean, to me, it's really, really difficult. But I think one of the ways in which you do that and you overcome that is you got to find a way to translate your knowledge, your experience, your value in a way that's going to get through those initial wickets. But I think companies I think a lot of talent is turned away because it doesn't fit the mold of the traditional hiring process.
Switch to Rich. Rich, anything you want to expand on that?
It's a great question. We have to. I think it's fair to lay the cards on the table and say, you first have to take a look at the organization holistically. It may not be a place you want to or can stay at. However, I will say this: I've always felt like top performance matters and is extraordinarily visible. I remember talking to JOs who were concerned about their position or what they were doing at the time and whether or not they'd get to certain places in the community. And I used to tell them the same thing. I said, hey, focus on your performance in the now. Focus on the moment. Be a top performer now. It will get noticed. You will be recognized. And at the same time, I think we have to, again, I'm the semantics guy kind of. I think semantics are important in many respects because oftentimes we're not deconstructing the right stuff. When we talk about, for example, when we talk about people and mission, I totally agree with Mike when he says that, sometimes companies get it wrong. They are inextricably linked. And I would almost offer that it's not even one's more important than the other. I think it's a dynamic swap between the two. Sometimes it's time to focus on the people. Sometimes it's time to focus on the mission. Sometimes the mission is focusing on the people, right? So it's that. So leaders have to be able to, and organizations have to be able to understand that metric and that relationship, because you can't do it without the people. And then one final thing I'll add, just because there's a lot of talk about leadership, and I think it's so important. Again, two words that get conflated all the time: leader and person in charge. They are not the same thing. Okay. You can be a person in charge and not be a leader. You don't get to call yourself a leader. I say this all the time. It's like calling yourself funny. Unless you're making someone laugh, you're not funny, right? Other people make that decision, and other people make that decision based on behaviors. Okay, leadership is a behavior, not a position. So as a leader, you need to behave in a way that allows people to make the decision to call you a leader. And part of that is conceding your own obsolescence, right? I used to also say to JOs, the irony of great leadership is if you do your job right, you work yourself out of a job, okay? Because you have picked the people and trained the people and developed the people so that they take over, right? And you get excited about those people. I remember getting excited. I got excited when Mike Sorelli showed up at the command, right? I mean, those are the people you get excited about. Man, this guy is so much better than I am. If you're saying that consistently, you can be confident that you're doing
what holds Rich, what I think holds a lot of leaders back is again fear and ego. Is if I'm in charge of a team of 10 and I can never let go of control, then I'm not going to develop the people below me. You said it beautifully. And again, while it's almost muscle memory for everyone on here, because we've served under great mentors and coaches that told us our job is to work ourselves out of a job. That's not so common, and a lot of people make themselves a critical point of failure by not training the people below them, which actually in the end is disloyal to the organization because you're going to hold it back.
We have
just one thing on that. Just one thing on that. Hopefully not over the top of Rich's really fine comments, but it seems like we've gotten also away from, if you're having B and C players interview, one, if you're on the outside looking in, that might not be a company you want to go to. Rich is right. On the inside, I think we've gotten away from telling people how they're doing at their job. We've gotten afraid to tell people once they've been ordained a person in charge that they're not very good at what they're doing. And we've gotten away from that continuous conversation, they'll like to call it, about whether you're moving up toward the A player or not, back to previous commentary. And I think if you're going to win the talent war, you also got to be winning the constructive feedback war, so that there is no question whether someone is in a C role or C player making hiring decisions that are critical to the organization. That should just never happen.
Yeah, and we have just a couple minutes left, so I'm going to ask I have a challenging ask for each of you, and then we'll finish here with Mike and George. Obviously, the talent war is all about people, and we've discussed leadership at length, and I know we can continue to go at length about it, but we're going to start with Josh, Tom, Rich, and then Brian, and that is in the talent war, in your opinion, and if you haven't picked it up, by the way, pick it up, go on Amazon and pick it up now, but in the talent war, what is the overt leadership quality that you believe is going to help drive people to victory in the talent war? And we'll start with you, Josh. And we'll try and keep it 1 minute or less.
Yeah, no, I mean, honestly, I would just point right to the book. The essence, in my view, of the book is that this is hard and that this is about people. And as Mike was saying, and as George was saying, a lot of people who are in these roles who are not acting as leaders, as Rich said wisely, are taking the easy way out. And they're saying, you know, check boxes is how I make my decisions. You can't do that with people. People are incredibly complicated. And if you take the time to be a leader and take the effort that's needed to get this right, to actually put in the effort to be a leader with the people, with the complex people, the hiring, the training, the supporting, you're going to have a great organization. So that's my leadership challenge.
Great. Tom, final thoughts of the leadership quality that stands out to win the talent war?
It's more general. There's always been a distinction between excellence and average. You know, the military invented assessment, trying to help the State Department back in the 50s. I think it was Doug Bray. He was with AT&T and another psychologist at the time before their Iowa psychologists invented assessment centers. And they did it in a way to distinguish average from excellence. There's always that distinction in leadership. You just have to drill down on the attributes that you need, interview and research as the folks on this broadcast have done, what excellence looks like, and then assess toward that excellence and leave the rest behind.
All right. And we'll go to Rich. Final thoughts on leadership quality.
Yeah, so I outlined 5 leadership attributes in the book. I will pick one, and that is authenticity. Okay, authenticity, I think, is one of the most important qualities, because authenticity builds trust. Okay, and trust is absolutely fundamental for a leader, for a team, for any group working together. And it does not mean you have to be nice. Okay, I had a boss once. He was my CO. He was always grumpy. He was always asking the hard questions. He was not fun to be around, but he was like that all the time with everybody, which meant I could trust him. He was actually a phenomenal leader, but his authenticity was what was part of the thing that I could count on. And you can adjust as someone who's in that position. So I think authenticity would be my vote.
Love that.
I love that as well. Brian, please.
You know, the one thing I would say would be they're dynamic. They have range. I think the best leaders are what the organization needs when they need it, and they can do so in a way that brings others along with them. So to me, it's, you know, I see so many people they have like a small set of styles, and if the problem matches up well, that works well. But to me, the best leaders that I've worked with and for, they're very dynamic. They have a lot of range.
Great. And then we'll go George and then Mike.
Oh, good. I get to go first. I get to beat Mike to it. The number one trait, I think, and Mike and I tried to express in this book, is probably humility. And I wanted to steal that before you got to it. So now you have to pick another one, Mike. Mike and I tried to express in this book that it's a constant iteration, that even we share in the book how many mistakes, how many scars that we've gotten from how we've done this process. And if you're a great leader, you're always trying to do something better. You're always trying to coach, mentor, train, or select better some way, somehow. You're never satisfied with the people that you're bringing on board.
And I think that's why the Army recently updated their leadership manual and put humility at the top in terms of attributes. First off, can't thank the panel enough.
Yeah, amazing folks.
You talk about humility. It's humbling to even be associated with these men and women. Let me index on, and Rich, we're gonna have to do one, and I know Brian will be all in, is on high performing, performance versus trust. We'll definitely have to do a episode through the Talent War group, which we'll talk about at the end here. Yep. Let me just hit on integrity, which was on the wall, Tom, as you know, at Enron. And this goes back to what Ben Horowitz, who I'm a big Ben Horowitz fan, Andreessen Horowitz venture capital firm. just wrote a book, and I'm about to butcher it. It's not what you say, it's what you do. Enron, which was studied in the book, The War for Talent, was hailed as a talent acquisition, talent management, business case example, and it ended up to be one of the most unethical organizations. So
it was a business case example. It turned out to be.
Integrity, again, it's either your yes or no. It's not optional. If the person does not have integrity, which sometimes can be hard to evaluate in the interview process, but you catch it very quick when they're in the organization. Yeah. They're done. They're gone. There is no debate there. You got to get them out of the organization. If you can't trust somebody, then it will start to erode at the culture.
And before we get into the talent work group, number one, obviously, Mike already thanked the panel. We all thank the panel very much. If you watched, if you asked a question, if you engaged, if you have picked up the book, we thank you dearly for that. And we also ask that you spread the word out, because clearly everyone involved on the panel had contributions to what Mike and George are trying to accomplish here, and that is win the talent war. So please send that out, share it, mention it to people who you know are in those hiring positions or assessment positions that are going to help an organization thrive ultimately. So thank you for that. And then, Mike, if you want to talk about the talent war group.
Yes, humbled on the same day that we released the book. We've also made the announcement of the launch of something we're calling Talent War Group, and each of these individuals on the panel is part of that group, to include Rich, George, myself. There's about 40 members, and you're talking about high-performing, seasoned, proven American, British, Canadian special operations leaders, CHROs like Tom, business executives, psychologists, all who understand and believe in the power of talent, and more importantly, how to develop talent into high-performing individuals and teams. Now, what's unique about this group is that they have a lot of scars. We've made a lot of mistakes in this journey. We're still on the path of enlightenment to building elite teams. But what the Talent War Group is, intended for small to mid-sized businesses, is it's a business leader's guide to building your respective elite teams and managing the most important asset in your company that drives the true value of your company, your human capital. And your people are everything. So we are going to be producing a lot of content. You can find us at Talent War Group on LinkedIn. We'll be doing these LinkedIn live sessions 2 to 3 times a week. We'll make sure that the invites are out, that you have a pre-notice, and we're going to hit a range of subjects that, for any leader who's not been through a formalized leadership development program, tap into these men and women. They can help you from making the same mistakes, or prevent you from making the same mistakes we have.
All right, so here it is, the Talent War. We thank all of you. Congratulations again. Thanks. Mike and George. We cannot express enough how proud we are of what you've been able to accomplish, and the circle of people that you keep close to you. So thank you very much, everyone. Please send out, please connect with everyone on LinkedIn, by the way. John, Dr. Cotton, Brian, Rich, Tom, myself, Mike, and George. Connect with us. We would love to be part of your network and to, look at it. so again,
we didn't plan that. I don't see one with Brian and Rich. Just fail.
Again,
where's my copy?
Thank you all, and we're going to sign off, and that's it.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Tell us when we're out.